Hello, everyone. I'm Talaya Dendy, and you're listening to Navigating Cancer Together, the show that has something for everyone facing cancer. Why? Because everyone is different with different needs, beliefs, and perspectives. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I encourage you to open your minds and your hearts. Before we dive into the conversation, I'd like to remind you that Navigating Cancer Together is everywhere. Make sure to subscribe and follow the show and stay updated on new episodes. Listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or your preferred podcast app or platform. Today, our very special guest is Caroline Rose. Caroline is a wife, a mom, dog lover, TEDx speaker, and 3-time stage 4 cancer survivor. After being diagnosed with a highly aggressive lymphoma when she was 27 years old, Caroline overcame the odds as she beat her cancer 3 separate times. Caroline is a big believer in the power to heal and has found that sometimes life's most beautiful moments can be found in the depth of our struggles. Today, Caroline lives in her hometown of San Antonio, Texas, with her husband, 2 children, and 2 4-legged fur babies. We have all faced struggles at some point in our life and will more than likely face more. Caroline joins me to share her story of love, loss, surviving cancer, and the ultimate realization that the hope of true joy always outweighs the struggle. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, Caroline. I'm so excited to talk with you today. First of all, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. I love this month. It's so much fun just with fall. And I've got 2 high schoolers now. So they're kind of in the depths of their fall sports. And it's a great time of year.
Wonderful. I'm so honored to have you here today. Your story is amazing. You have been through so much, and you are really here to talk with us today to, of course, share your story of love, loss, surviving cancer, and the ultimate realization that there is hope and true joy in all the struggles that we encounter in life. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, Caroline, and what helped you in the peaks and valleys of your life.
Currently, I live in San Antonio, Texas. I am a mom to my son Tommy, who's a freshman, and my daughter Ellie, who's a junior, both in high school. And I'm a wife of, 19 years, I think. And obviously, my 2 dogs, I cannot leave them out. But, I think life has just taken me on a journey that I probably never anticipated. I grew up wanting to be a surgeon. That was my passion, my calling in life, so I thought. And I attended Vanderbilt University and then moved to New York for a few years before moving to Los Angeles for a med school program. And I was in the middle of my first year of med school when I was really shockingly diagnosed with this highly aggressive, incurable stage 4 cancer. And when I say shockingly, I really do mean shockingly. I always say the day I was diagnosed, I was in the very best shape of my life. I was a big marathon runner. I had just run Boston and New York. I had done triathlons. And the reason we found the cancer is I was training to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and I had some blood work done just to make sure everything was okay. And they found my platelets at a crazy, scary, life threatening level. And it just didn't make sense to us because what we saw on the outside was so different from what the blood work was telling us. But sure enough, they removed a lymph node and did the stage testing, and the cancer was absolutely everywhere. So we did 8 rounds of chemo. The doctors were very, very clear that they could treat my cancer, but they could not cure my cancer. This was back in 2004, 2005. And I remember this feeling of just being slightly hopeless. It kind of was, well, why am I going to do all this chemo if the cancer is just going to come back
Mhm.
anyway? And I'll never forget at the time, my uncle was involved with MD Anderson and just different cancer programs. And he came to me and he said, here's the thing, your goal is not to cure this, or your goal is to get into remission and just buy time, because chances are there is so much research going on, you never know what new treatments might be available the next time you face this disease. So don't think about being cured, think about just doing the best you can today, and get into remission and just go one step at a time. And that really, really shifted my mindset because I was such a goal-oriented person and so type A with med school and marathons. And, I wanted to fix this problem and solve
Mhm.
it, but I had to kind of surrender and know that I couldn't. And that's really how I approached it. And so I did get into remission for about 8 months. In that time, was able to get married and freeze my embryos. The cancer came back, which we had expected. So I did my first bone marrow transplant in 2006 and went into remission for 3.5 years after that, where I had my two kids. And then when my daughter was 2 and my son was 5 weeks old, we realized the cancer had come back. And so that's when I went into my second bone marrow transplant in 2010 and have been in remission ever since.
That is a heck of a story. What kept you going through all of this, Caroline? I mean,
Mhm.
27 is really young
Mhm.
to, first of all, start a cancer diagnosis, but then just continue to go through it 2 other times throughout the years.
Mhm.
What were you thinking?
That's
Mhm.
a great question, and I think it changed each time. I think
Yeah.
when I was first diagnosed, if I'm being honest, I think I was in a bit of denial. I was 27 and you're invincible when you're 27, right? Nothing is
Yes.
really gonna take us out, and I don't know if I really fully accepted the full scope of the gravity of the situation. I think I kind of didn't want to accept the seriousness that I was facing. And I think the second diagnosis, it hit me a lot harder because I had to go inpatient for a full month. I really did see the possibility of death and my own mortality. And I think at that point, I had my husband, I had my family, I had my dog. And I think I was really just trying to survive so that I could continue on this life with them. And then my third diagnosis, I always say was completely different from my first 2 because I was a mom, right? I
Yeah.
had babies at home, babies, and it was all about them. That was where it was the scariest just in medical terms, just because we'd already done the potentially heavy duty curative treatment and it didn't work, so we didn't have many options, but scary in that I wanted and needed to be there for my kids, and I was willing to do anything I could to fight for them. And that doesn't mean that I didn't have my days where I wanted to give up, because I did. But I
Yeah.
think there just is something so primal in us that kind of overrides that, I guess, weakness, if you will, that creeps in when you're just tired and sick and just drained and depleted. And so I think really it was wanting to live to be there for them and guide them and see them grow up and graduate and all the things that you just so desperately want to see.
Yeah, that is a huge motivator, and I can only imagine. I don't have children, but I can imagine the motivation that beautiful children would give you and just say, "Hey, I'm gonna throw this thing into overdrive. I gotta give it all I got because I have people depending on me, people that I
Mhm.
wanna see grow and
Mm.
get married and do all these wonderful things in
Yeah.
life."
Yeah. 100%.
I'm so glad that you are doing well today. I
Thank
really
you.
want to know, Caroline, because one time is too many, but going through cancer 3 times, how
Hmm.
did that impact your relationships and eventually your marriage?
Hmm. I think with my marriage, I really say this and I really mean it. I got so lucky. I married the most incredible man, and he's just the most golden human. We had dated almost 6 years when I was diagnosed the first time. And I remember he proposed halfway through my first diagnosis. I was bald, gray, sick, and he chose that. And so it was really magical and really unbelievable. It was like I found this unicorn that was willing to accept me however, wherever I was, and literally sickness or in health. And he has never wavered. And so I wonder daily how he hasn't, but
Wow.
he just
Yeah.
hasn't. And I think with my kids, I think one of the most interesting things was when I was, third diagnosis when my daughter was 2, one of my friends gave me the most unbelievable gift. She gave me a session with a child psychologist because my fear was, my son was so young, but my daughter was 2. She was just old enough to sort of understand, and I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know if I should tell her, not tell her. There are all these questions of how to navigate it. And I had one session with this child psychologist, and I will never forget her words. She said, "Always, always, always be honest with your kids. Now do it in an age appropriate way, but tell your daughter, I have a really, really, really big germ bug, not a little germ bug, like when you have a fever or get sick, but mommy has a really big germ bug. And I'm going to take medicine that's gonna make my hair fall out, but that's okay because it means the medicine is working. We got syringes and put finger paint in them and let her, kind of play around with those. We got a doll and put the white tubes in the doll that and named them tubies just to kind of, help her be more familiar and comfortable with all the medical gear. And she said, never make a promise you can't keep. Don't tell her you're going to go to the hospital and be home in 4 days if you don't know for sure you're going to be home in 4 days. Never ever keep the fact that you're sick from her because then deep down they're going to lose a little bit of trust. And that's the most important thing is for kids to be able to trust their parents or their adults around them to give them valid information of what's going on. And I just thought that was so amazing. She advised that I take my daughter with me when I shaved my head, and I did, and that was hard, but, you work through it, and so I think now fast forward all these years, I think we have a very close relationship, my daughter, my son, myself, with my husband, and I think that they definitely worry about me at times, and I hate that because I don't want them to have to, but cancer doesn't, you don't get out unscathed, right? We're
Yeah.
all affected. The whole family is affected. And I think sometimes the caretakers go through, arguably a very difficult situation where they feel completely powerless, right? My husband
Yes.
wanted to help, but he couldn't do anything other than just be there. And truth be told, that's all I needed him to do is just be there, right? But it affects them in such a profound, powerful way. I at least felt I had a little sense of control, right? Like I could eat more healthy. I could drink more water. I could walk a little bit further. There's something the patient feels where we have a little bit of control that they don't. And so it
Mm.
really is kind of a rebalancing when you come out the other side, right? They've been your
Yes.
nurse, your caretaker, and you have to adjust back to a marriage of sorts, on a little bit more of an even playing field. And so there is always kind of ups and downs and reinventing our marriage and relationships. And I think in terms of friendships, that was just fascinating. That was just, and many people, I hear this, a lot of people say this, that it was so interesting who showed up and who didn't. And
Mhm.
and people maybe you would expect to not show up did and vice versa. And it's just really interesting to watch. And think when I was 27, it hurt my feelings, the people that weren't there. Now being 46, I get it, right? Like, I don't know if I would have showed up when I was 27. I think it would have freaked me out. And I would have seen
Yeah.
one of my good friends. It would have terrified me. But I didn't understand that back then. So it was a very long process of sort of forgiveness and having a perspective of where they were coming from.
Yeah. All great points. I'm so happy that you were blessed with an amazing husband.
Yeah.
I have to say God must have knew who you needed,
He did.
and he blessed you with that. Your husband is
Yeah.
amazing. It's really interesting because women have so many different experiences. And unfortunately, there are women who get married and their spouse, their husband leaves them. Then that's another layer that they have to work through and figure out. So I'm glad that everything worked out. Also, thank you for touching on the importance of caregivers and the things that they go through
Mhm.
because it's getting better. But a lot of times, they are not even thought about or addressed when,
Mhm.
someone is going through cancer and their spouse or their partner goes with them, their caregiver
Mhm.
goes with them to the doctor, they're not
Mhm.
even addressed at
Right.
all. And so, thank you for bringing that up about caregivers. It's really important because they're
100%.
experiencing it as well.
They are, and, when people come to me and they say, "My friend or my loved one or, whoever was diagnosed with cancer, what do we do?"
Mhm.
And one of the first things I say is, take care of their people, and yes, your friend or your coworker is going through a cancer diagnosis, 100%. Let's focus on that. But let's also focus on their people, whether it's their husband, their best friend, their kids, go over and make a sack lunch and put it in the fridge so their kids can have it the next day. Get a gift certificate for a massage for their caretaker, walk their dogs, like help their people because they need it desperately. And to your point, they are easily overlooked because all the attention is on the patient for the most part.
Mhm, mhm. Let's transition now, Caroline, to the clinical trial that you utilized for treatment. It was actually a
Hmm.
groundbreaking clinical trial, and the
Hmm.
donation of your older brother's marrow saved your life.
Hmm.
First of all, Caroline, how did you learn about this clinical trial?
Well, I did all my treatment at MD Anderson. And on the third diagnosis, we were living in Los Angeles and they followed me locally just for checkups and whatnot. And we really kind of started asking around, and the common consensus was, right, all doctors, we don't really know what to do. Well, we flew to Houston because this one doctor in the stem cell transplant department had, been with me now probably, I don't know, 6, 7 years. And I went into his office one day and I just said, I don't know what to do. And he said, look, give me some time. And he did the research and came back and said, I found this clinical trial. There are only 68 people that are being accepted. And I got you in, you're number 66. And so this really, really was new and terrifying and completely unknown. There was not a roadmap. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what the side effects were going to be, but it was, I think, the best choice. But if I'm being honest, maybe my only choice. And we did it. And my doctor was there with me the whole way. And I am fairly certain last I heard that it was I don't know how the clinical terminology, but they had enough long-term data where it is now a standard of care treatment for many different, it's not just for bone marrow transplant, but for other diseases as well.
What concerns did you have about participating in the trial, if any?
There was a 40% mortality rate. That
Mhm.
number stood out pretty strongly. I just
Yeah.
yeah, so we didn't know, and the another interesting part about it was my first transplant, they harvested my brother's bone marrow through an apheresis machine. So they kind of gave him shots of Neupogen to really cause an overproduction of all the blood things, right? The red blood cells, white blood cells, all the things. And it popped out and they spun his blood and took those elements and returned the rest of his blood back to his body. Well, the second bone marrow transplant, they took him into the operating room and they actually went in through his hips to the marrow and extracted it that way. And the other interesting difference was the first transplant. Well, let me say this first because this is, I think, can at least confused me back in the day. They explained it this way. They said, look, every person has cancer in their body, but a healthy person, their immune system can red flag it and kill it off. But for whatever reason, my immune system couldn't do that. So I had a blood cancer. Well, the thought was if we don't have medication or chemo that can cure it, let's take out your immune system, get rid of it, and replace it with a healthy person's immune system because they will be able to red flag the cancer and kill it off. And that's the potentially curative treatment. The scary thing is when they kill off your immune system, you don't have an immune system. So you are literally stuck in a hospital for probably a average 2 weeks with zero defense. If you get any sort of germ, that's kind of a really, really big deal. And so that is the fear, and then the other fear is that once they, do give you the donor cells, that they won't take and they call it engraftment. So there are a lot of risks, and I think that knowing it was my brother's cells gave me this incredible sense of comfort and strength because, he's my older brother. He's always protected me. And it just really mentally, spiritually, everything gave me this really incredible belief that I knew we could do this.
That's very powerful
Mhm.
and a blessing too, because like you said, sometimes it doesn't take,
Right,
and then you're left with, well, what do I do now?
right.
What words of encouragement do you have for people who are on the fence about participating in clinical trials?
Mhm. I think I would say do as much research as you can, but I've also found research to be a double edged sword sometimes. I think that Google might not be our best friend when we are looking up things. It can be slightly terrifying. I think really on the surface, I would say talk to your doctors, talk to your family, but really my real answer is listen to your gut. I think that we all have the answers inside of us. And I think that if we really get quiet and really, really pay attention, we know what we should do. We really do.
Yeah.
And that's probably not the most scientific answer, but I really think that more than anyone telling you what the statistics are or chances are, or you know the answer. You really do. We all have that wisdom inside of us.
That is the perfect answer. I I totally agree because you do know the key I think is just pausing, getting still and getting quiet and getting clear on what it is that you really want. And I think yes, we all know, listen to your intuition, your gut.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yep. It's that God voice inside. It's like our
That's
GPS, it just guides
right.
us the right way every time.
So true. And it's funny that you say that because I always say God's compass is our GPS. So,
Oh my
yes.
goodness. That's
Yes, I get it.
oh my goodness.
Caroline, you have a deep sense of hope and faith. So,
Mhm.
please share with us what hope means to you.
Hope to me is very layered and very ever changing. I think that I started off my relationship with hope with kind of a simplistic and idealistic view that if I had hope, everything was going to be okay. And it doesn't mean everything is going to be okay. I met way too many patients while I was inpatient who didn't make it, and they had hope, and their loved ones had hope. And I think that made me angry. And I think I really, at times, turned against hope. I think I wanted to reject it because I was so upset that why did this person live and this person didn't? I've had personal loss in my life. And I think that at the end of the day, when I really look back, I have asked myself, did I lose hope? Did I not want to have hope? And I didn't ever lose hope because if I'd ever lost hope, I wouldn't be here today. And I
Mm,
wouldn't be here with the outlook on life that I do have because hope is essential, but it doesn't mean we're going to have a good ending. But I also think that, with personal loss, I've seen hope just change its form, right? These patients that didn't make it, I watched their loved ones set up memorials. I watched them, keep their memory alive in so many different amazing ways. And there's a lot of hope in that. It made it count for something. And so I think that it just is always there. It always changes, but we just have to be realistic about it and be, careful how we use the word hope because I don't want people to think that hope let them down, if that makes sense.
mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Those times when you wanted to reject hope
Mhm.
or you felt like you didn't lose it completely, but it was wavering,
Mhm.
How did you replenish your hope?
There was one moment that I think about often is it was that moment that I wanted to give up. It was that moment I either lost hope or I didn't want to have hope anymore. It was kind of that moment of just your rock bottom, I'm done, let me go type moment. And I think that if I really ask myself, why did I keep fighting? I mean, really and truly, it was because of my kids and my husband and my dog and just the quote unquote hope of the future and what it could be. And I had no idea what it would look like. I didn't know if I would ever have the strength to pick up my kids ever again. But it was the hope that one day I would, or the hope that it would all be worth it. And that is what I mean when I say hope is so essential, because that was the darkest moment I could ever have in my life. But yet, hope got me through it.
It's beautiful,
Hmm.
beautiful. You mentioned your dog, and
Yes.
let's transition now. You are an avid dog lover and a deep believer in the healing power of animals.
Hmm.
What role did your fur babies play in your healing process?
This is my favorite question. I believe dogs are angels. I think dogs are literal angels. I think that when I personally was going through all my treatments, I had rescued a dog. His name was Riley, Riley Rose. And Riley and I found each other at a time. It was just after my first diagnosis. I was really grappling with, I'm 20, well, eight, I guess eight at the time, just gotten married, but yet I have all these side effects and I think my cancer is going to come back and I don't really know what to do with my life. And I found this rescue dog and I wasn't even really looking for him. And he had been horrifically abused. He needed horrific, extensive medical treatments. And we just came together and saved each other. And I dedicated my life to rehabilitating him. And in the process, he completely rehabilitated me. And we just went on this journey together through the years. In my second and third diagnosis, I was tired and I was scared. And I didn't want to be tired and scared for my kids or my husband or my friends. They had worried about me for so many years. I wanted to be okay. And so I'd walk home from the treatment or from the hospital or just a day where I wasn't feeling well. And I smiled and I talked and I got dinner ready. I just did stuff that we all do for other people. But with dogs, you don't have to do any of that. You just can be. And it is this silent, almost refilling of your tank. Their love and their loyalty is just recharges you. And you never have to talk to them. You can lie in bed all day if you want. And they just love you exactly how you are, who you are, and where you are in that moment. And there is something so incredibly healing about that. And so many people met Riley and fell in love with him and have since rescued various animals, cats, dogs. And it has been the biggest gift to see what joy that animal has brought to their life. And they all say the same thing. Life is busy and we have all these complicated human relationships. We let each other down. We don't mean to, but we do. But the animals never do. It's just that dependable, constant, steady love that I deeply believe we all need.
I love that. How is Riley doing today?
Riley unfortunately passed away about, well, 2017.
Oh,
Um,
sorry.
but we have Gus and Axel Rose, who are our two current
Axl Rose.
dogs. And they are the funniest. We have a lab and a pug. And so they are just polar opposites in the greatest way. And they bring so much love and joy to our life. I'm surprised they're not in here with me now, but my pug snores so loudly that I can't have him. So, yes, they are. My kids adore them. They just make us smile all day, every day. We just adore them.
Wonderful. I'm not a pet owner, but I'm really starting to understand now why so many people love dogs. Just
Mm,
hearing more and more stories. And when I'm out walking and I see people with their dogs, and
yeah.
they just seem so at peace and so
Yes.
happy. But you can tell the dog is very aware and
Hmm.
happy to be outside, of course. But they're
Yes.
also like looking around, like, you better not touch my person.
Yes. Yes.
And I
One of
think
them,
that's so fascinating.
it
Yeah.
really is. They have this quiet protective presence, that
Yes.
is it makes you feel very safe. One of my favorite Riley stories was when my daughter was in preschool. We lived in Los Angeles and Riley would always ride around in my car and I had the back window open for him. He just loved that breeze. He's the funniest dog. And my daughter got out of school one day. I'm sorry, out of the car going into school, and we parked kind of by I guess, the brown wooden gate that went from the parking lot into they call it an outdoor yard to the preschool. And she was nervous and having a hard day. And she said, "Can I go rub Riley's head?" And I said, "Of course." And she went over and reached through the window and just rubbed his head. And she said, "Okay, I feel better now." And she really did. And I thought, "Oh, that is so sweet." And that we were walking in and I kind of looked over and I saw another mom and she had a little girl who was crying and upset. And I knew the mom and she kind of looked at me and I knew what she was asking. She was asking if that child could go rub Riley's head. And so I just kind of nodded and we waited by the gate. And this mom took this little girl over to my car and the little girl just kept rubbing Riley's head. And she kind of put her head onto Riley and kept rubbing. And then she turned around. She's like, "Okay, I'm okay now, mom." And so it turned into this tradition where we left Riley right there and the window down, and people would go over, and all the kids just started rubbing his head in the morning for good luck. And it really was, yes, was it sort of, like a mental trick for the kids? Sure. But I do believe it was rubbing his head transferred a sense of peace and comfort to these precious little angel kids that were going into preschool. And it just was the most touching thing to watch that day and all the days that followed, how this really became this tradition.
I like that story because it
Mhm,
speaks to the power of when people have, dogs, say, like if they're suffering from anxiety or depression, and they
mhm,
get dogs and other animals to help them through that. So it makes
mhm.
sense. Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
100%, yeah. And Riley was there with my daughter while I was inpatient in the second I was almost there 8 weeks in the hospital and couldn't see the kids. And I would get pictures of my daughter painting Riley's toenails or doing a tea party or, just all that it was her buddy, her playmate,
Mhm.
and it
Yeah.
just made me so grateful and so thankful to Riley and his patience and the love he had for my kids.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
When a person shares that they have cancer, others often they just don't know what to say.
Mhm.
What were some of the weirdest comments that people made when you were navigating cancer? And actually, Caroline, do you have any tips on what people should not say
Mm.
to a friend or family member when they're diagnosed?
Yes, I do. I think this would probably be I think anyone listening is going to nod their head and say, yes, exactly. I think that if you hear of someone that has been diagnosed, I would just ask that you please be cautious of saying two things. Number one, please do not say everything happens for a reason, because that is not the time that you want to hear that. You just
That is true.
and right up with there is God only gives you as much as you can handle, because we know that, but we don't want to know it in that moment. We really don't. And the other is just people saying, "Oh, well, my friends, brothers, coworker was diagnosed and blah, 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 blah." Honestly, I think the best thing you can do is just listen, and we want to be there and be supportive. But sometimes just listening. I think when you're first diagnosed and you tell people it is hard, it is scary, we just want to be heard. I remember telling one of my friends back in 2004 when I was diagnosed, I still talk to her about it today. Her response was, "That sucks." And it was so freeing because it was like, yes, thank you. This really does it's kind of crappy. Like, I
Mhm.
know it will be okay and I will get through it, but yeah, this is really not fun right now. And so I appreciated that so much. And I think that everyone's journey is so personal and so different. Sometimes I say it's like having a baby. We get pregnant and we have a baby, but yet no one's story is the same. Some people sail through their pregnancy and some people have sickness. Everyone has a different delivery story. So I can listen to yours, but mine's going to be very different. And I think it's giving everyone space and room and respect to make their journey their own. And if they want help or advice, I promise they will ask.
So true.
I promise they will.
That unsolicited advice when you're not feeling the best is
Mm,
doesn't feel good at all.
no, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Because it's overwhelming. It's
Mhm.
a million different diets you should follow. And many times they're very contradictory, right? And I mean, all of it, what treatments you should do, what exercise you should do. And I mean, that's where I go back to my God voice. I mean, that is where we know, we might do one form of exercise and I don't know, you do another form and it resonates and that's where you go. You might eat something that you think is the healthiest thing ever, but it's not really sitting well with your system and you eat something else. That's where you go. I think it is scary to do that because it's so much easier to have a roadmap. Like if you do these things, you will be cured or you'll get into remission, or there's not a written roadmap because our bodies are different. We're different. So we just have to kind of quiet the noise, I think, and try different things until we find what feels best for us, because I believe that is what we need to do to have the best result.
I agree. And when you explore and you try those different things, that also helps to build your confidence.
Mhm.
You're like, okay, I finally found this thing that works. So when something else is not working, I can find something else. And
Yes.
I think for me, that was at least what I experienced was like, okay, I can do this. I have to put in
Mhm.
the work, but I can do this.
Yeah.
And like you said, listen to the God voice
Mhm.
and just explore and not be afraid to try different things. That really helps boost your confidence as well.
Mhm. That's a great point. That is very true.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really important. And when we're going through it and people say things, like you mentioned, it's not funny at the time. But once you get through it and you're able to look back and you're like, they really had no clue what to
Yeah.
say. They just felt like they had to say something. So,
Right, 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 and once you've
yes.
gone through it, you have such a better understanding, or a loved one has gone through it, but thankfully, a lot of people haven't gone through it or had a very close loved one go through it, and so it is sort of giving them that understanding and empathy that they just thankfully haven't experienced it.
So
Yeah.
true. In July, something really wonderful happened for you.
Mhm.
In July of this year, you released the memoir, Dear Riley Rose, the story of a woman and her dog,
Yeah.
and how you saved each other's life. And
Yes.
in addition to what you've already shared about Riley, what
Mhm.
can readers expect to get from the book?
I think that one day, I think I was always so in my medical brain, scientific, math, numbers. I was very safe there. Anything creative was terrifying, actually. And so to write was very much outside of my comfort zone. I think one day I'd gotten home from the hospital and I wrote a letter to the woman who started the dog rescue, the one that where I found Riley. And it was very unplanned. I just wrote her thank you, this long thank you letter, and told her what Riley meant to me. And I think through writing that, I thought, this is such an interesting way to express my story and my emotions is writing through a letter format. And so Riley was we were so similar in that we were kind of broken and we were very distrustful of life, right? Like I was distrustful of, well, how do I ever trust life or feel safe in life when, you walk into a doctor's office and get a diagnosis, or some people receive that dreaded phone call in the middle of the night. Things happen in life. And so it's hard to really sink into it when you kind of develop a tendency to want to pull away and protect yourself. And Riley had had horrific abuse from humans, yet he was able to still trust. So we kind of helped each other through this. And so the book really is it's a big love letter to Riley, but it's really our journey together. And I think writing it to him, I could go into these more introspective places when he was just the only soul that was next to me, where I could really be quiet and think and just kind of process what had all happened. And so it is his hysterical antics, because he was the funniest dog, especially when he was younger, mixed with, my husband and our marriage and my kids being born, and then this cancer journey and all the great things that came with it, and really how he affected so many lives. And I think you combine all those stories together, and it really is this mixture of beautiful, happy, sad, gut wrenching, hysterical stories, if you will, and thoughts and revelations that created this book that I'm still in shock that I wrote.
You
Yeah.
know, when you were explaining the book, I immediately went back to the picture that popped up in my mind when you said you were in the hospital and you would get pictures of your daughter painting his toenails. And I kind of chuckled when you said that earlier because I'm like, that is a true playmate. That
Yes.
is a true playmate.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I was leaving for the hospital and I had to say goodbye to her. And I didn't know how long I was going to be gone. And I didn't know if I was going to come back. And it was just beyond words difficult. And I remember she said, "Mom, who's going to have tea parties with me?" And I didn't know. I said, "Well, my mom was there and my husband," but she kind of wasn't satisfied with that. She wanted her mom. And Riley was a big dog and he walked in the room and she said, "Oh, Riley will." And then she was happy. And then I could leave, but it was just that feeling of, "Thank you, Riley," and knowing that, because I think for children too, just the presence of a dog, they have a bad day at school, they come home and my kids just wrap their bodies around our lab Gus, and it's just sometimes they don't want to talk about it or tell me what happened. They just need to hug something and kind of absorb that energy and just be reminded that everything's going to be okay. And I really believe that that's what Riley did for me and my kids and our family and friends, and that's what our current dogs are doing now, and that's why animals are on this earth.
I agree. They
Mhm,
do bring such peace
mhm,
um, and comfort,
mhm.
and just the sense that you are okay just the way you are. That I love you no matter what, that is hard to find.
Yes, yes, and a reminder of sort of how we should be treating each other, right? Just
Yes.
this total not non-judgmental, outlook of others. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Where can anyone who's interested find the book, Dear Riley Rose?
Currently on Amazon and Barnes& and Noble or my website, dearrileyrose.com.
Okay, wonderful. DearRileyRose.com. I will have that information in the show notes for anyone who's interested in purchasing the book, but then also learning more about you, Caroline Rose. The other question that I have for you, and if you need to take a little bit of time to think about it, that's okay.
Okay.
In 1 to 2 sentences, if you could have an intimate conversation with cancer, what would you say?
Oh, that's actually pretty easy. Thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate you for what you were to me at the time. And thank you 100%. And I mean that. I really do. I think my life was on such a different course. Who I was, what I valued, the emphasis I put on things that in retrospect either didn't matter or were not serving me to the highest ability. I don't know if I ever would have been able to get out of that hamster wheel, and cancer completely took me out of it and has put me in this other life that is so beautiful and so filled with love and gratitude. And I can see things now that I never would have noticed before. I was so stuck in my own tunnel vision of what was I going to do next, accomplish next? How could I work harder, run faster, just more, more, more? And now I'm in this life that it is, I mean, it's polar opposite. And it's just so beautiful. And I'm so grateful that I can raise my kids with this perspective of, we have each other. We're so fortunate. We have our health and just laughter and joy. And I am so grateful. So thank you.
That's beautiful. It sounds like before you were diagnosed with cancer, achievement, and going, and all these things were like kind of what motivated you
Mm,
before.
yes.
Is that a fair assessment?
It is a very fair assessment. I think I was type
Okay.
A plus 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 plus.
Okay.
Yes, that is a very fair assessment.
Okay. What I heard you say when you just shared that was it made you realize what was important. It slowed you down, and are you happier now?
10 times, 100 times happier, 100 times happier. Happier even knowing, by the way, that there's a very, very, very high chance of a secondary cancer popping up. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I think, you know, we all live with that to an extent, right? We don't know what is going to happen. And I think that even living with cancer, I kind of call it the fifth member of our family. I am very okay with that, and I'm 100 times happier, and I would still choose this life with this circumstance, with this fifth member of our family all day, every day over the life that I used to lead.
And the fact that you said fifth family member, it really shows that
Mhm,
you have done a lot of the healing work and you're not fighting in the sense, a lot of people say battle, fight, do all these combative things to cancer, but I'm with you, Caroline. I really believe that it's like you have to coexist.
mhm,
You have to accept what is. And then you can really start to figure out, how do I keep going? What do I need to do? What do I need to do to heal? And all
mhm.
those things. So I
I
think that's
agree.
so important.
I agree. I think when we're diagnosed with cancer, I think that even if we get into remission or are declared cured, the cancer is always with us, right? I mean, it affects you so deeply and it changes you. And I think to your point, to reject it is really rejecting what we have gone through in our experience and what our caretakers have gone through and all the effort that was put in to try to heal us. You know, it's nothing to be rejected. It's something to be treasured and held on to. And I think that for all of us, just the acknowledgement that it exists is it's beautiful and healing all at the same time.
As we wrap up, let's think about the future. What
Mm.
is your soul calling you to do next?
Well, I do love public speaking. That is my favorite thing. And I think, you know, I tell my husband this when my kids graduate, I would love to open a dog rescue and just save as many animals as I possibly could. He's not quite as on board with that, by the way. But we've got some time to work on it. But that absolutely is my calling, 100%.
I think you would be wonderful at it.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Is there anything else that you haven't had a chance to share that you would like to share with the listeners before we end today?
I think you've done a great job of asking all the right questions. No, I
Thank
think we're
you.
good. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Thank you. It has been such an honor and a pleasure to talk with you. I love your
Thank you.
energy, your smile.
Thank
Although the folks listening out there can't see it, she has this beautiful smile that just
you.
puts you at ease. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so, so much for having me.
My pleasure. I would like to pose a question to the listeners. That question is, how has Caroline's story inspired you to find hope amidst the struggles? And how do you replenish your hope? Again, that question is, how has Caroline's story inspired you to find hope amidst the struggles? And how do you replenish hope? I'd like to give a shout out to the Navigating Cancer Together community and valued listeners. Thank you so much for joining us. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Please leave a comment on Spotify or send an email to nctpodcastfan@gmail.com. If you have enjoyed this episode and it spoke to your heart, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/NCT podcast. That is it for this Wednesday. And until next time, let's keep navigating cancer together. Take care.